All right, what we're working with today is solving absolute value equations part 2. And so some things you need to remember is that the absolute value of 2 is a positive 2, but then also the absolute value of negative 2 is also a positive 2. So remember, absolute value has 2 solutions. Remember, we had some steps. Let's highlight these steps. And on our previous assignment, we did not have step 1. We didn't have any of those, but today we'll focus on those. So step 1 is to get the absolute value alone. What I mean by that is you're going to have problems that look like this. And what I have to do is I'm going to have to get rid of this thing in front so that this absolute value is alone. I could also have something like this, the absolute value. And so again, my goal will be to get this alone. So this is what I'll have to get rid of, the plus 6. Okay, so when I say get something alone, that's what I mean. The only thing we want on the left side will be the absolute value. The next thing we have to do, remember, is determine if it's possible. And when you determine if it's possible, remember that the absolute value has to equal a positive. If the absolute value equals a negative, remember that is a no solution and we stop working. We don't have to do anything else. But again, we cannot check this important step here of no solution until we get rid of outside numbers. Remember, step 3 is when you break it down, when you have a positive answer and then you have the negative answer. Step 4 is to solve each equation. And step 5, we're going to do something. This is a new step. We're going to check for extraneous solutions, which are ones that really don't work. Really don't work. And we don't know that until we plug it in. And so it's a little bit of a process, but after doing some, you'll understand what I mean by that. All right, so let's look at example A. For example A, the first thing I need to do is I need to recognize what I need to get rid of. My goal is to have this absolute value alone. So the things on the outside that I don't want the 2 and I don't want the 3. Well, we treat this like an equation and we get rid of what's not touching first. So I'm going to get rid of the plus 3 by minusing 3 on both sides. And so now I have 2 absolute value of x minus 4 equals 4. And what you need to recognize is that this is 2 times this. We will never distribute, but this is 2 times, and the way you get rid of a times 2 is we divide by 2. And so now I have the absolute value of x minus 4 is 2. So if I go back and look at my rules, my absolute values alone, step 2 is to see if it's possible, and it has to be positive. Well, it's positive, so it's possible. So I'm going to do the first one as positive 2, and the second one is negative 2. Remember that the absolute value always stays the same. It's only the outside number that changes. And so now we solve both of these equations. So to get rid of a minus 4, I'm going to add 4. And so I get 6. And then to get rid of a minus 4, I add 4. And I get 2. Now, we need to check our equations, but really I need to let you know this is only going to happen if you have an absolute value equals something with an x over here. Okay, the only time we're going to have extraneous solutions is when there's an x on the left and the right. So because I don't have an x on the left or the right here, on the right over here, I don't need to check those. Okay, all right, let's go do some problems like example 1 or example A. So we draw a line down for number 1. And the first thing you got to do is get rid of this. So everybody go ahead and get rid of this, and when you think you have it, press play. All right, so you should have added 4 to both sides. And so now it's the absolute value of x plus 3 is equal to 2. And that's a positive, so we can break it down. Some of you might have said, oh, look, it's a negative, we can't do it. But again, you have to get rid of the outside stuff before you can do that. So my first problem is x plus 3 is 2. And then my second one is x plus 3 equals negative 2. And I solve both of those. And I solve both of those. So those are my 2 answers. And again, because there was not an x on the right side, there's not going to be extraneous solutions. All right, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to try number 2 on your own. Get rid of the number in front, and then when you think you have it, press play to check your work. All right, so you should have noticed that this was a times negative 3, so I'm going to divide by negative 3. And so I get the absolute value of 3x minus 5 equals negative 4. So my absolute value is alone. But now you need to look at the problem, and step 2 says to see if it's possible. Well, this is a negative. An absolute value can never equal a negative, so this is a no solution. Right? Same thing with number 3. I'd like you to try number 3 on your own by moving the outside numbers. And then when you think you have it, press play. All right, so you should have minus 4 on both sides because that's not touching it. Now we can't forget this negative, so I'm going to bring that down. And does anybody know what that negative is? It's not just a negative. Remember, it's a negative 1. So to get rid of a negative 1, because it's times, I'll divide both sides by negative 1. And so it's the absolute value of x minus 7 is equal to positive 6. So if you notice, up until right now, it looked like it was going to be a no solution. But because I divided by a negative 1, it does have a solution. And now we need to break it down. X minus 7 equals 6. X minus 7 equals negative 6. And you should have solved both. Okay. All right, let's go back up and look at the next type of example. This is the type like this that you need to check for extraneous. Extraneous. And again, I do that because there's an X on both sides. So right here, the issue is when there's an X, I don't know what X is, so I can't do step 2. I can't see if it's possible. So that's why I have to check for extraneous, because I don't know what X is. And so I set the first one up where it stays the same. Where's my mouse? Oops, that's not where I wanted it. So that stays the same. What gets tricky is this other side. I'm supposed to make it negative. I'm supposed to make the answer negative. So when I make the answer negative, what happens is I change everything. So since this was a positive X, it becomes a negative X. And since this was a plus 1, it becomes a negative 1. So that's the tricky part, is that's what you change on the right side. All right, so now we're going to draw down and solve each. So I get 1x minus 3 is equal to 1. And I add 3 to both sides. So I get 1x is equal to 4. And remember, a 1x doesn't really matter because it's positive, so I could just make my box. There's my first solution. Now I need to do the same thing over here. I need to get my x to the other side, so I'm going to add x to both sides. And so I get 3x minus 3 is negative 1. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I get 3x is 2. And I divide by 3. So 2/3. Okay, so now this is where it gets a little tricky because we have to plug it in to see if it works, okay? And so I need to plug in my 4, and I'm going to plug that one in first. And so let's do gray. So it's going to be absolute value of 2x right here, and instead of x, we're going to write a 4, that's right, minus 3 equals the absolute value. Instead of x, what did we say we're plugging in for this one? Yep, 4 plus 1. Okay, so let's do this. So 2 times 4 is 8, minus 3 is equal to 5. 8 minus 3 is 5. And so the absolute value of 5 equals the absolute value of 5. That is true, so that one works. Now we need to check this one here. This one's going to be a little harder because it's a fraction, but we can do it. So let's change our color. Let's do blue for this one. We're going to plug in this 2/3. And I don't know if I have a blue marker that color. We will go with red. Okay. So again, instead of an x, I'm going to plug in 2/3. So it's the absolute value of 2 times 2/3 minus 3 equals, let me scoot this over some, equals the absolute value of x, which is 2/3 plus 1. So remember when we do fractions, this is just top times top, bottom times bottom. So it's 4/3 minus 3 is equal to 2/3 plus 1, which is 1 2/3. Okay, so now we're going to have to do some math here. It gets a little tricky. Most of your problems aren't going to be fractions, so this one is definitely harder or a worst case scenario. And so it's going to be 4/3 minus, I need to make this a third, and so I timesed everything by 3, so minus 9, and so that is negative 5/3. Bring this one down. That 1 almost looks like an absolute value. Okay, and so 5/3, when I drop the absolute value and it becomes positive, 3 goes into 5 one time with 2 remaining, and this works out too. So this one, a lot of work, but it worked. There are going to be times when you do this, you get something like 5 equals negative 2, or 5 equals negative 5. These are examples that don't work, and so you would say that this solution doesn't work, okay? Again, you will not have a ton of extraneous solutions, but you need to know how to do them. All right, so we're kind of running out of time for this video, so let's do this last one. We're just going to do number 4. And so remember, the first one stays the same. X plus 3 is equal to 2x plus 12. And then over here, x plus 3, remember you have to change all of this, and it becomes negative, equals negative 2x minus 12. And so I'd like you to pause the video to go ahead and solve those so you're able to check them. So go ahead and check your work and see how you did. Pause the video so you could double check it, and then we're going to check our solutions in a different color. All right, so you notice I started it out by saying my x was negative 9, and instead of x, I plugged in a negative 9. And so negative 9 plus 3 is negative 6. 2 times negative 9 is negative 18 plus 12. So that's the absolute value of negative 6 is equal to the absolute value of negative 6, which those two are the same, so that answer works. Now try the same thing on the other side with negative 5. All right, so I plugged in negative 5, and I have negative 2 is equal to negative 10 plus 12. So the absolute value of negative 2 is equal to the absolute value of 2. Well, this you actually have to take the absolute value of each, but we do see that they are equal. So this solution also works.